Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to walk through the ancient streets of Kyoto 800 years ago, surrounded by a world so visually rich and complex that every color, every fold of fabric told a story? Picture yourself stepping into the Heian period, where court nobles drifted through palace corridors in layers of brilliantly colored silk, their robes flowing like living art. This wasn't just clothing, it was a language, a social code, a hidden world of meaning woven into every thread. Fashion in feudal Japan wasn't about personal expression in the way we might think of it today. It was about power, identity, and sometimes even survival. From the rise of the samurai class in the Kamakura era to the bustling merchant culture of the Edo period, what people wore and how they wore it revealed everything about their place in the world. You could tell a person's rank, their family background, their political allegiance, and even their personal ambitions, just by glancing at their attire. There's a deep and fascinating mystery behind these garments, one that goes far beyond aesthetics. Why did certain colors become forbidden to all but the highest nobles? How did a simple fold in a sleeve communicate loyalty or defiance? And what did it mean when a samurai chose to wear something unexpected? These aren't just historical footnotes. They're clues to understanding an entire civilization. Clothing in feudal Japan was armor, it was diplomacy, it was art and rebellion, all wrapped into one. For centuries, these visual cues dictated interactions, shaped alliances, and quietly enforced the rigid structures that held society together, or sometimes tore it apart. So join me on a journey back in time, where we'll unravel the secrets behind the robes of emperors, the armor of warriors, and the humble garments of common folk. We're going to explore how something as everyday as getting dressed could define a person's entire existence. This is about more than fashion. It's about human ingenuity, the timeless desire to belong, and the quiet ways people found to speak, even when they weren't allowed to say a word. By the end of this video, you won't just see these historical outfits. You'll understand the stories they were meant to tell. To understand the world of silk and armor, we must first step into the rigid social world that demanded it. Feudal Japan operated under a strict hierarchy, a pyramid of power where every single person had a designated place. At the very top sat the emperor, considered a divine figure, but often a puppet in terms of real political power. The true authority for much of this era lay with the shogun, the supreme military commander, and the network of regional warlords known as daimyo. Below them were the samurai, the warrior class who served their lords. And supporting this entire structure were the peasants, the artisans, and the merchants, with a class of outcasts existing completely outside the system. This wasn't just a social order, it was a legal one, meticulously enforced. And one of the most powerful tools for maintaining this order was clothing. Imagine a world where the law dictated the sleeve length of your robe or the shade of your trousers. That was the reality for centuries, governed by sumptuary laws. These were detailed regulations that controlled extravagance, and most importantly, made social rank instantly visible. For the ruling classes, these laws preserved their elite status, making their wealth and power unmistakable. For everyone else, they served as a constant, visible reminder of their station, preventing any blurring of the lines between classes. The restrictions were astonishingly specific. During the Heian period, for example, the depth of color in your robes was a direct reflection of your court rank. The most vibrant, saturated hues, like deep purple or rich crimson, were reserved for the highest nobility. The lower your rank, the paler and more washed out the colors you were permitted to wear. It was a visual spectrum of power. Certain fabrics were outright forbidden to commoners, silk was the exclusive domain of the aristocracy and high-ranking samurai. A wealthy merchant, no matter how much money he had, could be punished for wearing a silk kimono. It wasn't about affordability, it was about privilege. These rules evolved but never truly disappeared. As the merchant class grew wealthier during the peaceful Edo period, they began to subtly challenge these sartorial boundaries. Unable to wear overtly luxurious silks, they turned their ingenuity inward. They would wear a simple, legal outer garment of plain cotton or hemp, but line it with the most exquisite, brilliantly patterned silk. It was a hidden rebellion, a secret luxury known only to the wearer. Or they would focus all their resources on a single, permissible accessory, an elaborately decorated tobacco pouch, or a finely crafted comb using understated elegance to display their taste and wealth without technically breaking the law. Enforcement was taken seriously. Samurai officials could stop someone in the street and demand to know their business and their social class. If your clothing did not match your stated rank, the consequences could be severe, ranging from heavy fines to confiscation of the garment itself. This created a society where you could literally see the social structure walking down the street. A samurai's distinct topknot and 2 swords, a farmer's practical straw raincoat, a court noble's 12-layered ju-ni-hitoe robe. Each ensemble was a uniform, a walking CV that announced one's identity, obligations, and limits to the world before a single word was ever spoken. But to truly see this social hierarchy in its most beautiful and intricate form, we must turn to the one garment that united them all, yet distinguished them completely: the kimono. While we often picture it as the iconic national dress of Japan, its story is one of adaptation and reinvention. Its origins actually lie across the sea, with early versions derived from Chinese hanfu clothing, introduced to Japan around the 8th century. These garments were characterized by their straight, narrow sleeves and front-opening design. But the Japanese didn't just adopt this style, they transformed it, softening the lines and creating a uniquely graceful, T-shaped robe secured not with buttons, but with a single sash called an obi. This seemingly simple wrap-around design, with its straight seams and generous cut, was a stroke of genius. It was the ultimate versatile garment. Because it wasn't tailored to fit a specific body shape, the same basic kimono could be easily adjusted to wearers of different sizes, or even passed down through generations, with the fit being managed by how it was folded and tied. This practicality made it accessible to everyone, from the highest noble to the poorest farmer. Of course, the kimono worn by an aristocrat and the one worn by a peasant shared little beyond their silhouette. For the elite, the kimono was a breathtaking canvas for artistic expression and a display of immense wealth. In the Heian court, nobility would wear the ju-ni-hitoe, or 12-layered robe. This wasn't literally 12 individual kimonos, but a complex ensemble of many overlapping robes, each sleeve and hem carefully arranged to show a subtle, cascading spectrum of colors at the cuffs and neckline. This practice, known as kasein no irome, was a highly refined art form. The choice of color combinations, which shades of violet, which hints of green, which undertones of red, was dictated by season, occasion, and most importantly, rank. A court lady's entire cultural sophistication was judged on her ability to assemble these layered hues poetically. The fabrics were the finest silks, often embellished with elaborate embroidery, gold leaf application, and hand-painted scenes from classical literature. Wearing this was like walking in a masterpiece. For the samurai class, the kimono took on a different role. Beneath their imposing armor, they wore kosode, which translates to small sleeves, referring to the tighter wrist opening compared to the earlier aristocratic styles. This was a more practical, streamlined kimono that allowed for movement. When not in battle, the samurai's kimono, often made of fine silk, displayed their family crests, known as mon. The number and placement of these crests were another clear indicator of status. A formal kimono with 5 family crests was a powerful statement of lineage and authority. Meanwhile, for the common people, the kimono was purely functional. Theirs were made from hard-wearing, humble materials like hemp, cotton, or coarse silk, if they were slightly more affluent. The decorations were minimal. The colors were often simple indigo blues or earthy tones derived from plants, as sumptuary laws forbade them from wearing bright dyes. A farmer's kimono was shorter, allowing them to work in the fields, and designed for durability over beauty. This single garment form, therefore, became a perfect mirror of feudal Japanese society. It demonstrated the shared cultural foundation. Everyone understood the language of the kimono, while simultaneously reinforcing the unbreachable divisions of class through material, color, and decoration. The kimono was never just clothing. It was a map of the social world, woven in silk and thread. And within this world of silk and social codes, no single garment represented the pinnacle of aristocratic life more than the breathtaking ju-ni-hitoe, the so-called 12-layered robe of Heian court ladies. To call it a dress feels like an understatement. It was more akin to wearing a portable, personal art gallery and a piece of architectural history all at once. The name is a slight misnomer. It wasn't always exactly 12 layers. The number could vary slightly, but the principle remained: an extravagant, meticulously curated stack of robes, each one contributing its color, texture, and meaning to the overall masterpiece. The process of dressing was a ritual in itself, beginning with the foundational layers. Against the skin, a noblewoman would wear a simple white underrobe of raw silk, known as the kosode. This was the only layer that was actually tailored to the body. Over this went the hitoe, an unlined robe that served as the first visible base for the color scheme. Then began the mesmerizing parade of layers, each one called an uchigi. These were all essentially individual kimono, cut from the finest, most translucent silks imaginable. A single robe might be so thin that it was almost like wearing colored air. But when layered over a dozen others, the colors would blend and deepen, creating a completely unique, shifting palette at the open collar and the long, flowing sleeves. The outermost layer was the uwagi, a heavily decorated jacket-like robe that often featured elaborate embroidery, paintings of seasonal scenes, or intricate tie-dye patterns. Over this went the karajinu, a short, wide-sleeved waistcoat that was a formal holdover from even earlier Chinese-inspired court dress. Finally, a long, pleated train called the mo was fastened at the waist, trailing behind the wearer as she moved. The total weight of this ensemble could easily exceed 20 kilograms, or over 40 pounds. Imagine carrying that much weight in delicate fabrics every single day. Movement was not just difficult. It was deliberately restricted to an elegant, measured shuffle. A lady of the court did not walk, she glided, her progress a slow and stately progression that communicated immense privilege. Her world was one of seated elegance and poetic conversation, not physical labor or haste. The clothing itself enforced this grace, but the true genius of the ju-ni-hitoe was not in its weight, but in its color. This was where art and identity truly fused. The practice was known as kasein no irome, the layering of colors. Each visible sliver of fabric at the sleeve and neckline was carefully chosen to create a specific color combination that was deeply symbolic. These combinations had poetic names like plum blossom after snow, suggesting a white robe over a faint pink one, or young maple in spring, implying layers of fresh green over a hint of red. The choices reflected the season. a specific occasion, or a verse from a classic poem. A woman's entire aesthetic sensibility and cultural education were on display in her sleeve. A poorly chosen combination could be a social embarrassment, while a clever, unexpected one could win great admiration. It was a silent, beautiful competition, a way to communicate intelligence, taste, and status without uttering a single word. The rustling of these silk layers was even said to create a gentle music known as sawa sawa, an auditory symbol of refinement that followed a noblewoman wherever she went. In the rarefied air of the Heian court, where a misplaced poem could mean social ruin, your attire was your armor, your resume, and your art, all woven together in a dozen layers of breathtaking silk. While the cut and layers of a garment announced your status, the very color of the fabric spoke in a far more nuanced and secretive tongue. In a society governed by strict visual codes, color was never merely decorative. It was a potent, symbolic language with the power to elevate or condemn. The palette available to a person was dictated by an intricate web of sumptuary laws, natural scarcity, and deeply ingrained cultural beliefs, making every hue a clear signal of one's place in the world. The most vibrant and sought-after colors were born from the earth itself, extracted from plants, roots, and minerals through incredibly laborious processes. This inherent difficulty is what made them so exclusive. Take, for instance, the revered hue of bini, a brilliant crimson red. This color was painstakingly derived from the petals of the safflower. Astonishingly, it took a vast field of these flowers enough to fill an entire garden, to produce just a few small cakes of dye potent enough to color the edges of a single noblewoman's robe. The process was so complex, and the yield so tiny, that this radiant red became one of the most expensive commodities in the world, weight for weight worth far more than gold. It's no wonder that its wear was restricted to the highest echelons of the imperial court and the most powerful families. To see someone wearing a deep, true bini was to understand instantly that you were in the presence of immense wealth and privilege. Similarly, the regal purple known as murasaki was extracted from the root of the Cromwell plant, a difficult and time-consuming endeavor. This rich, deep purple became synonymous with the highest ranks of nobility, so much so that it was often simply called the forbidden color, as its use was legally prohibited for those outside the innermost circles of power. On the opposite end of the spectrum were the humble, accessible colors derived from easier-to-grow plants. Indigo, which gave a range of sturdy blues, was the color of the common people, the farmers, artisans, and merchants. It was durable, affordable, and because it grew well in Japan's climate, it was everywhere. The earthy tones of yellows and browns from the gardenia plant, or the green from indigo, overdyed with yellow, were also widely available, further cementing this visual divide between the brilliant elite and the muted masses. But the language of color went far deeper than simple rank. Specific hues were intimately tied to the seasons and the poetic emotions associated with them. A courtier's wardrobe was a rotating exhibit of nature's cycle. In spring, they would wear layers suggesting young shoots of grass, wakakusa, or the faint pink of cherry blossoms, sakura iro. Summer called for cooler, flowing combinations reminiscent of rippling water mizu iro, or lush willow trees, yanogi iro. Autumn was a time for brilliant red maple leaves, momiji iro, and the subtle browns of fading foliage, while winter was represented by layers of stark white, grey, and violet, echoing snow and barren landscapes. To wear a summer color in winter wasn't just a fashion faux pas. It was a sign of a poor education and a lack of cultural sensitivity. This poetic symbolism could also convey complex emotions and political messages. The tale of Genji, that seminal work of Heian literature, is filled with instances where a character sends a carefully chosen colored robe to a lover. The hue speaking volumes about their current feelings, longing, jealousy, or congratulations. In the turbulent Sengoku period, the era of warring states, colors took on a direct military significance. Daimyo and their samurai armies would use specific colors on their banners and armor, lacing to identify themselves on the battlefield. The Taikta clan was known for their use of red, while the Usugi clan favored deep blue. Your colors announced your allegiance before you even drew your sword. This intricate system turned every public appearance into a silent performance. A noblewoman's layered sleeves were a living, breathing poem. A samurai's armor lacing was a declaration of fealty. A merchant's simple indigo robe was a statement of resignation to his social standing. From the rarest crimson to the most common blue, every thread was imbued with meaning, making the streets of feudal Japan a constantly shifting tapestry of silent, eloquent communication. Yet for all its artistic expression, the kimono could be a cage of silk, restricting movement and enforcing a life of quiet contemplation. The samurai, the warrior elite of this feudal world, required something entirely different. Their lives depended on a garment that was not just a symbol, but a second skin built for survival on the battlefield. Their answer was yoroi, a masterpiece of functional design that transformed a warrior into a moving fortress, yet allowed the grace and speed necessary for combat. This was battle fashion in its most lethal and beautiful form. The construction of a full suit of yoroi was a marvel of medieval engineering, achieved without a single piece of solid plate metal like European knights employed. Instead, Japanese armorers used a brilliant technique called kozen, lacing together hundreds of small individual iron or leather scales with colorful silk or leather cords. This created a flexible, articulated surface that could absorb and deflect the impact of arrows and sword strikes far more effectively than a rigid plate, which could crack or bend and trap the wearer. The entire suit was then coated in resilient lacquer, making it weatherproof and resistant to the elements, a crucial feature for long campaigns under the open sky. Every component served a precise and vital function. Starting from the top, the kabuto or helmet was instantly recognizable by its iconic shape. Forged from multiple plates riveted together, its most fearsome feature was often the midate, an ornate front crest that could be a family emblem, a mythological creature, or religious symbol. But perhaps the most dramatic element was the shikoro, the neck guard. Made of layered lames that curved downward, it protected the wearer's vitals without hindering head movement. Some helmets even featured a hollow tube at the back, a nodoa, designed to let the warrior's top knot of hair pass through, keeping it out of the way during the chaos of battle. The body was protected by the ju, the cuirass or chest plate. This came in two main styles. The older boxer yoroi was designed for aristocratic archers fighting on horseback, with a pronounced right side that helped deflect arrows. The later, more streamlined jumaru and haramaki styles wrapped around the body and were secured under the left arm, offering greater mobility for foot soldiers who needed to wield swords and spears with agility. Hanging from the ju was the kusazori, a divided skirt made of protective panels that shielded the thighs and groin while allowing the warrior to run, mount a horse, and assume fighting stances. But samurai armor was never just about defense. It was a psychological tool, a billboard for identity and intimidation. The lacing that held the scales together while functional was done in specific colors that announced a warrior's clan allegiance from across the smoky battlefield. The most personal expression, however, was reserved for the mempo, the face mask, often fashioned into a ferocious snarl or a demonic grin complete with a bristling mustache of real hair. The mempo was designed to terrify opponents and protect the wearer's spirit by hiding any trace of human fear or pain. Combined with the imposing helmet, it transformed the samurai into a supernatural figure, a demigod of war whose very appearance could break an enemy's resolve before the first blow was ever struck. This fearsome exterior, however, concealed a surprising reality. A well-made suit of yoroi was surprisingly lightweight, often weighing between 25 and 30 pounds, significantly less than the 60+ pounds of a full European suit of plate armor. This allowed for the incredible mobility and endurance that samurai tactics demanded. Their armor was not a clumsy shell. It was an extension of their body, a testament to the art of war where survival depended as much on artistry and intimidation as it did on the strength of steel. Yet when the battle cries faded and the armor was stored away, the samurai's identity didn't disappear, it simply changed its uniform. The transition from the battlefield to the administrative halls required a different kind of armor, one that communicated authority, refinement, and their privileged place at the top of the social order. For their daily life in times of peace, the elite warrior class adopted a garment known as the kamishimo, an ensemble that perfectly captured their dual role as both fearsome fighters and sophisticated statesmen. The kamishimo was a striking two-piece outfit worn over a standard kimono. It consisted of two very distinct components. The first was the hakama, those wide, pleated trousers that create such a distinctive, dignified silhouette. Far from being restrictive, the hakama's generous cut allowed for freedom of movement, a subtle nod to the warrior's need to be ready for action, even in a civilian setting. The second piece was the kata-jinu, a sleeveless vest with exaggerated, rigid shoulders that flared out like wings. This was the real genius of the design. Those stiff shoulders weren't just for show. They created an imposing, broad-shouldered profile that commanded respect and attention in any room, mimicking the formidable presence of armored shoulder guards. It was a psychological tool, a way to maintain a warrior's aura of power, even while dressed in civil attire. The fabrics used were a clear declaration of status. While commoners were restricted to hemp and cotton, the samurai's kamishimo was typically crafted from the finest linens or even luxurious silks, often featuring subtle patterns or the wearer's family crests, or mon, woven or dyed onto the fabric. The choice of material was a quiet but powerful flex. It demonstrated that even in peacetime, a samurai was a member of the ruling class, entitled to a level of luxury that was legally forbidden to the wealthy merchant and artisan classes below him. This wasn't just clothing for comfort. It was a walking legal document that verified his right to govern. This sartorial choice profoundly reflected the samurai's evolving place in society, especially during the long peace of the Edo period. With major wars a thing of the past, these warriors were gradually transformed from feudal warlords into bureaucrats, administrators, and scholars serving their daimyo lords in sprawling castle towns. The kamishimo was the perfect uniform for this new life. Its dignified appearance conveyed the gravitas expected of a government official, while its underlying structure and design paid homage to the martial traditions that were the very foundation of their power and identity. They were, in effect, wearing their resume. The influence of samurai peacetime fashion extended far beyond their own class, eventually shaping the entire nation's sense of formal attire. The hakama, in particular, was adopted as a symbol of learning and high status. It became the standard garment for educators, scholars, and students, most notably in the martial arts disciplines like kendo and kudo, where it preserved the direct link to its warrior origin. Even today, the hakama remains a potent symbol of tradition and formality in modern Japan. Worn during university graduation ceremonies, Shinto rituals, and classical performance arts. This enduring legacy shows how the samurai's practical everyday wear transcended its original purpose to become a timeless icon of Japanese culture. A silent testament to an era where what you wore spoke volumes about who you were and the power you held. But for the vast majority of people living in feudal Japan, the world of brilliant silks and lacquered armor was a distant spectacle, something they might glimpse during a lord's procession, but would never experience themselves. Their reality was one of sun-baked fields, manual labor and clothing designed for a single purpose: endurance. The attire of the peasant class was a testament to pure functionality, born from necessity and shaped by the very soil they worked. While the nobility expressed status through layers of color, the commoners spoke a different language, one of resilience, resourcefulness, and a quiet, deeply ingrained cultural pride. Their wardrobe was built from the most humble of materials. Hemp was the absolute foundation, a tough, fibrous plant that grew reliably even in poor soil. The process of turning hemp stalks into wearable cloth was long and labor-intensive, involving soaking, beating, and spinning the fibers by hand into a coarse, sturdy thread. This resulting fabric was incredibly durable and breathable, perfect for working long hours under the hot sun. For those with slightly more means, cotton became a prized alternative following its wider introduction in the Sengoku period. Softer and more insulating than hemp, it was still a luxury for many. The most common color by far was a deep, inkai blue, achieved through dyeing with the indigo plant. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice. Indigo dye actually strengthened the fibers and had natural insect-repelling properties, making clothes last longer and protecting the wearer. A perfect example of form following function in the most practical way. The typical outfit for a male farmer was designed for maximum mobility and protection. He would wear a simple, short kimono called a kosode, usually hitting above the knee to keep the hem out of mud and water. Underneath, he'd pair it with momohiki, loose-fitting trousers that were tightened at the ankles with cords. This design allowed for a full range of motion when planting, hoeing, or harvesting, while the tapered legs prevented bugs from getting in and snagging on underbrush. On his feet, he'd wear tabai socks with divided toes, and either waraji, sandals woven from straw rope, or geta, wooden clogs that elevated the feet above wet and muddy ground. A wide-brimmed straw hat and a straw rain cape called a mino completed the ensemble, offering essential protection from the elements. For women, the practical kimono was also shorter than its aristocratic counterpart, often tied back with a simple cloth sash or cord called a obai-jime to keep the sleeves out of the way while working. They too would wear momohiki trousers for fieldwork, or would tuck their kimono skirts up into their obai in a style known as mo-biki, creating a kind of makeshift shorts for greater freedom of movement. A tenugui, a thin cotton towel, was an indispensable multi-purpose accessory, used as a headscarf to absorb sweat, a washcloth, or to carry small bundles. Decoration was minimal, not for a lack of creativity, but because sumptuary laws strictly prohibited commoners from wearing anything that could be seen as extravagant. Flaunting visible wealth through clothing could bring serious punishment. Yet within these severe constraints, a beautiful, subtle language of expression emerged. Weavers incorporated intricate patterns into the fabric itself through techniques like kasuri, a form of ikat dyeing where threads are tie-dyed before weaving to create beautiful, blurred geometric or figurative patterns. Small, subtle embroidery might grace the inside of a collar or the hidden edge of a sleeve, a private delight for the wearer. Patterns often drew from the natural world that surrounded them: flowing water, bamboo leaves, or tortoise shells, symbols of longevity and good fortune. These hidden details transformed their garments from mere tools of labor into personal treasures, a quiet affirmation of identity and beauty within a life of hardship. Their clothing was a testament to the idea that culture and meaning are not born from wealth, but from the human spirit's enduring desire to create and belong. While the rigid social pyramid dictated who could wear what, and the warrior class donned their armor of status and steel, there was another, deeper force shaping the very soul of Japanese attire, a profound spiritual belief system. The intertwined religions of Buddhism and Shinto didn't just influence fashion. They wove their core principles of purity, impermanence, and humility directly into the fabric of everyday life. This spiritual undercurrent created a distinct aesthetic that valued the essence of a material over its ornamentation, an idea that would resonate from the monastic cloister all the way to the imperial court. In Buddhism, the concept of non-attachment to worldly things was physically manifested in the robes of its monks. Their garments were the ultimate expression of humility and simplicity, designed to break down ego and vanity. The most striking example is the kessa, a rectangular stole worn over the robe. This was not merely a piece of cloth. It was a sacred object, often passed down from master to disciple. And its origin story is as humble as its appearance. The earliest kessa were literally pieced together from discarded rags, often sourced from cloth found in trash heaps, or even shrouds from burial grounds, that were carefully washed, cut into small squares, and stitched back together in a patchwork pattern. This practice, known as funzo-e, or rags from a dust heap, was a constant, tactile reminder of the Buddhist teachings on impermanence and the rejection of material desire. The patched pattern itself, often resembling a field of rice paddies, symbolized the nourishment of spiritual practice. While high-ranking monks might later have kessa made of fine brocade, the symbolic patchwork pattern remained, a permanent nod to these ascetic roots. The primary color for these robes was a range of earthy tones, saffron, ochre, and black, achieved through natural dyes, further emphasizing their connection to the earth and a life devoid of worldly splendor. Shinto, Japan's indigenous animistic faith, brought a different but equally powerful set of rules to the world of dress, centered on the concept of purity, or kega. In Shinto, the divine, known as kami, resides in nature, and to approach the gods, one had to be ritually clean. This deeply affected the clothing worn for ceremonies and by priests and priestesses serving at shrines. White became the paramount color, not for its beauty, but for its symbolism of purity, innocence, and renewal. Shinto priests performing rituals would wear garments of stark, undyed white silk or linen, representing a blank slate, a soul wiped clean of spiritual pollution. The designs were purposefully minimalist, avoiding complex patterns that might distract from the sacred act. For major ceremonies, the chief priest might wear a more elaborate outfit like the ikon, a layered court-style robe in tones of green and orange, but even these were steeped in symbolism, with each layer and accessory representing elements of the natural world revered in Shinto. The most dramatic example of this purity-based dress is seen in the attire of Miko, the shrine maidens. Their iconic uniform consists of a bright red hakama trousers over a pure white kimono. This combination is powerfully symbolic. The white represents purity and sacredness, while the red symbolizes life, vitality, and the sun, and is also believed to ward off evil spirits. Every element of their dress, from the way their hair is tied to the type of footwear they wear, is designed to mark them as intermediaries between the human and the divine, vessels of pure intention. This religious emphasis on simplicity and natural materials did not stay confined to temple and shrine grounds. It profoundly influenced the aesthetic sensibilities of the entire culture, especially the aristocracy. The Buddhist appreciation for worn, imperfect, and humble beauty, known as wabi-sabi, began to seep into secular fashion. The nobility, surrounded by their brilliant silks, developed a taste for garments that evoked this quiet, refined elegance. They might choose robes dyed in subdued, dusty colors inspired by autumn leaves, or twilight colors that spoke of transience and muted beauty, rather than overt power. The influence of the Kesa's patchwork pattern can even be seen in the aristocratic fashion of Yamagara or Kanoko shibori, a sophisticated tie-dye technique that created small, intricate white spots all over a dark fabric, mimicking the look of a fawn's spots, or more abstractly, the patched humility of a monk's stole. It became the height of fashion to display a spiritual understanding through one's clothing, to show an appreciation for the deeper, quieter beauty found in nature and austerity. A noblewoman's 12-layered robe might now include a layer of rough, natural hemp subtly peeking out from beneath exquisite silks, a conscious and fashionable nod to the virtue of humility. In this way, the sacred and the secular continuously conversed through cloth, with the devout robes of monks and priests quietly guiding the fashionable world toward an aesthetic that found profound depth in simplicity and spiritual meaning in every thread. In the intricate language of feudal Japanese dress, you could tell a great deal about a person long before your eyes ever reached their face. The fabric of their kimono, the colors of their layers, even the way they moved all spoke volumes. But to truly understand their daily reality, their station in life, and even the weather, you needed to look down. Footwear was the final, crucial punctuation mark in the sentence of an outfit, a world of its own that ranged from the humblest straw to the most exquisitely lacquered art. For the vast majority of people, the farmers, artisans, and merchants' footwear was defined by one material: straw. Their everyday shoes were waraji, sandals woven from rice straw rope. Simple, affordable, and disposable, they were secured to the foot with straps that laced through the toes and around the ankle. While practical for traction and keeping the feet cool and dry, they wore out quickly with hard use. A farmer might go through several pairs in a single month during planting or harvest season, making the weaving of waraji a common household skill. For even more treacherous terrain or wet conditions, they might wear ashida, wooden pattens that were essentially geta with much taller teeth, lifting the feet high above the mud and muck of the rice paddies or rainy streets. The iconic wooden geta, often referred to as clogs, were ubiquitous across classes but varied wildly in design and decoration. At their most basic, geta are a wooden platform with two vertical slats on the underside, known as ha. These teeth elevate the foot, protecting the hem of the kimono from dirt, water, and snow, a constant concern when wearing long, expensive garments. For the commoner, geta were plain and utilitarian, made of untreated cedar or paulownia wood. But for the nobility, geta transformed into a canvas for high art. A courtier's geta could be made of precious ebony or sandalwood, intricately carved with nature scenes, and then lacquered to a high, gleaming finish. The straps, known as hanao, were not simple rope, but woven from brilliant silk brocade, matching the colors of their exquisite robes. The sound of their footfalls changed too. While the commoner's geta made a simple clack on the paving stones, the nobles might be fitted with a resonating chamber and metal clappers underneath, creating a delicate, ringing sound with each step, an auditory announcement of their privileged approach. Then there was zori, the elegant, flat-soled sandals that were the formal equivalent of geta. While geta were for everyday outdoor wear, zori were reserved for more formal occasions and indoor settings. Peasant zori were, again, made of straw. But for the elite, they were crafted from luxurious materials like silk brocade, fine leather, or even padded rush grass that was dyed in beautiful colors. The divide between geta and zori was so distinct that it was considered improper to wear geta with a formal kimono ensemble. The choice of shoe was a direct reflection of the occasion's importance. Uniting almost all footwear was one unique and essential accessory, the tabai sock. These are the distinctive socks with a separation between the big toe and the other toes, a design that allowed the wearer to securely grip the thong of the geta, or zori. For laborers, tabai were made of tough cotton or hemp. For the upper classes, they were made of soft, white silk. The whiteness was not just a symbol of purity, but also of status. Keeping pristine white tabai clean in a world of unpaved roads was a constant challenge, and therefore a clear sign that the wearer did not engage in manual labor. In winter, padded tabai provided warmth, and for those venturing out in the rain, waterproof tabai made of bearskin or treated leather were available. The tabai is a perfect example of how every element of dress, down to the socks, was meticulously adapted to both the practicalities of life and the unspoken rules of the social order. From the silent, snowy print of a noble's lacquered geta to the quick, worn steps of a farmer's waraji, the ground beneath one's feet told its own rich story of life in feudal Japan. Yet for all the meaning woven into robes and armor, one of the most immediate and revealing signals of identity sat atop the head. In feudal Japan, hairstyles and headwear were not mere fashion choices. They were meticulously crafted crowns of identity, broadcasting a person's age, profession, marital status, and social rank from the moment they entered a room. From the most ornate courtly coiffures to the practical hats of the peasantry, the head was a canvas for some of society's most rigid and expressive rules. For women, the language of hair was particularly intricate and evolved dramatically over a lifetime. A young, unmarried girl would wear her hair long, straight, and flowing down her back, a style known as komi sage, symbolizing youth, innocence, and availability. The pivotal moment in a woman's life was her marriage, and this transition was marked by a profound change in her appearance. Upon wedding, a woman would adopt an elaborate updo, signaling her new status as a wife. The most iconic of these was the shimada mage, a wide, looped chignon that perched high on the head. This style wasn't just beautiful, it was a feat of engineering. Creating a shimada mage required backcombing, generous amounts of binsuk wax, a pomade made from camellia oil, and a small pad of false hair or cotton, padding to achieve its distinctive shape. It was then secured with a long, ornate hairpin called a kanzashi and a flat, decorated comb. The kanzashi itself was a world of hidden meaning. The material, tortoiseshell, lacquered wood, or precious metal indicated wealth, while the design motifs conveyed silent messages. A hairpin decorated with plum blossoms might symbolize perseverance and hope, while one with a crane signified longevity and good fortune. For courtesans and geisha, these hairstyles reached even more spectacular heights, with different named styles indicating their rank and level of training within their profession. For the samurai class, the most defining feature was the chonmage, the famous topknot. Its origins were intensely practical. On the battlefield, a helmet needs to fit snugly and securely. The chonmage solved this by shaving the front and top of the head to reduce perspiration and itching under the heavy helmet, while the remaining hair at the back and sides was oiled, tied into a small topknot, and folded forward over the shaved pate. This created a perfectly stable, cushioned base for the helmet to sit upon. But as the samurai transitioned from warriors to bureaucrats during the peaceful Edo period, the chonmage evolved. It lost its purely practical military function and transformed into the ultimate symbol of samurai status, maintaining a perfectly shaved pate and a neat, oiled topknot became a daily ritual that signified one's pride, discipline, and membership in the elite ruling class. For a samurai to have his topknot cut off was a punishment of the highest order, a public shaming that stripped him of his identity and honor. Completing any ensemble was the final touch of headwear, each piece serving a potent blend of function and symbolism. For the nobility, the eboshi was an essential marker of court rank. This black lacquered linen cap, shaped like a delicate, upright peak, was worn by courtiers and aristocrats. The exact style of the eboshi, its height, the angle at which it was worn, and the way it was tied under the chin was dictated by strict court protocol, and immediately communicated the wearer's position in the imperial hierarchy. It was the formal crown of the civilian elite. For the common people and travelers, the most ubiquitous form of headwear was the kosa, a term encompassing a wide variety of hats and baskets designed for protection. The simplest was the tsujigasa, a conical hat woven from sedge grass that shielded the wearer from sun and rain. The jingasa, literally war hat, was the helmet worn by foot soldiers. Much simpler than the ornate kabuto of high-ranking samurai. It was often a sturdy, bowl-shaped piece of leather or iron that could also double as a cooking pot or a wash basin on campaign. More enigmatic were the aminakosa, or basket hats, woven from bamboo or willow. These deep, basket-like coverings were worn by everyone from pilgrims to palanquin bearers. Their function was dual. They offered superb protection from the elements, but they also provided a degree of anonymity, partially obscuring the wearer's face and allowing for a quiet, humble passage through the world. From the lofty eboshi to the humble straw kosa, what one placed on their head was the final, undeniable punctuation in the silent but eloquent sentence of their social standing. But while the kimono itself was a canvas of social meaning, it was held together by what would become its most dramatic and expressive feature, the obi. That wide, beautiful sash is so iconic today that it's hard to imagine it any other way. But its journey from a simple string to a sculptural work of art is a fascinating story of fashion, status, and pure ingenuity. In the earliest days, the kimono was secured with nothing more than a narrow cord or a thin strip of fabric called a hiko obi. Its job was purely functional, to keep the garment closed. It was soft, pliable, and tied in a simple knot. But as the kimono evolved, so did its fastening. The sleeves grew longer and more open, the layers more voluminous, and a more substantial band was needed to keep everything neatly in place. The real transformation began during the Edo period, a time of unprecedented peace and prosperity. With major battles a thing of the past, the samurai class began to focus more on cultural pursuits and, inevitably, fashion. At the same time, a wealthy merchant class, known as chonin, emerged in the bustling cities. Legally, they were stuck at the bottom of the social hierarchy, forbidden from flaunting their wealth through the fabrics of their kimono. But they discovered a brilliant loophole, the obi. Since it was technically a functional item, the sumptuary laws were less strict about its decoration. This opened the floodgates for incredible creativity. The obi exploded in width, length, and opulence, transforming from a humble fastener into the undisputed centerpiece of the entire ensemble. The materials used were a clear declaration of wealth and taste. For formal wear, the most coveted obis were made of nishiki, a lavish brocade silk woven with threads of gold and silver. These were incredibly expensive and time-consuming to produce, often featuring elaborate pictorial scenes or intricate geometric patterns. For everyday wear, people might choose hakata ori, a sturdy, textured silk from the Hakata region, or tsumugi, a slubbed silk known for its soft, rustic elegance. The way an obi was tied became a language in itself. with different knots indicating everything from one's age and marital status to the formality of the occasion. A young unmarried woman might wear a bold, dramatic bow like the oteko knot, which resembles a large, intricate drum, signaling her youth and availability. A married woman or a geisha would opt for a more subdued, elegant knot like the teiko musubai, a boxy knot that sits neatly on the back, projecting maturity and sophistication. The size of these sashes is almost difficult to believe. A formal women's obi today can be around 12 inches wide and over 13 feet long. In the Edo period, they could be even more extravagant. All that length was necessary to create the elaborate, structured knots that became a status symbol. The act of tying a formal obi was a two-person job, requiring skill and strength to wrap, fold, and secure the stiff brocade into a perfect, gravity-defying shape. To maintain this structure, a small pillow or pad was often placed underneath the knot, creating that distinctive silhouette. This wasn't just fashion, it was architecture for the body. For the wealthiest women, displaying this opulence became a competition. They would wear multiple obis layered over one another, or choose obis so wide and heavy they could barely move their arms. A dramatic and undeniable display of a life free from manual labor. The obi, in the end, became the ultimate canvas for silent storytelling. A place where legal restrictions were creatively circumvented, and where personal wealth, artistic sensibility, and social aspiration were all tied together in one magnificent, statement-making bow. For the children of feudal Japan, stepping into the world of clothing was a process that began almost at birth, and was steeped in tradition, symbolism, and a surprising dash of practicality. From their very first moments, an infant's attire was designed not just for warmth and comfort, but to offer spiritual protection in a world where childhood survival was far from certain. Newborns were often dressed in pure white, unlined cotton kimono, a color symbolizing the purity and innocence of a new soul. But these garments were also frequently adorned with bold, hand-stitched patterns featuring creatures known for their strength and vitality, such as turtles or cranes, which were believed to imbue the fragile child with those same resilient qualities. It was a parent's hopeful charm, woven into cloth, for a long and healthy life. One of the most significant early milestones was the miyamari, the first shrine visit when a baby was about a month old. For this sacred occasion, an infant would be dressed in their first truly formal kimono, a tiny, exquisite version of adult, were often gifted by the maternal grandparents. This was the public presentation of the child to the community and the gods, and their clothing reflected the gravity and joy of the event. But the most telling sartorial ceremony was arguably the first obi age, or cord-tying ceremony. Before this point, babies and very young toddlers of both sexes wore kimono that were left open and simply tied shut with soft cords. There was no distinction. Every child started life in what was effectively considered gender-neutral clothing. The obi age ceremony, which typically occurred around age 3, was the moment the divide began. For a young girl, this meant being dressed in her first full kimono outfit, complete with a proper soft obi sash tied in a simple knot. For a boy, it was a ceremony known as hakama-gi, where he would be presented with his first pair of hakama trousers, signaling his entry into the world of men. As children grew, their daily wear did indeed become a charming mirror of adult fashion, but with distinct twists that acknowledged their youth. While sumptuary laws still applied, restricting the use of certain silks and dyes based on the family's social class, there was generally more leeway for brighter, more cheerful colors and playful patterns. You would see children from samurai and merchant families alike in kimono, decorated with vibrant scenes of jumping carp, playful puppies, or scenes from popular folk tales. These motifs were not just decorative, they carried specific wishes from the parents. A pattern of flowing water or mighty waves symbolized a hope that the child would navigate life's difficulties with ease, while bamboo represented resilience and the ability to bend without breaking. Practicality was also a key consideration for active young lives. A child's kimono was often made with extra long hems and seams that were only loosely basted shut, not firmly stitched. This clever design allowed the garment to be easily let out as the child grew, extending its wearable life considerably in a time when cloth was a valuable resource. For everyday play, the outfits of commoner children were made of durable, easy-to-wash cotton, designed to withstand the rough and tumble of games and exploration. Even the way a girl's obi was tied was different. Instead of the large, stiff, formal knots worn by adults, a young girl's obi was often tied in a soft, simple bow at the back, allowing for much greater freedom of movement. Through their clothing, children were gently but steadily guided into the roles they were expected to fulfill as adults. A young boy in his hakama and haori jacket was learning to carry himself with the dignity of his father, while a girl with her increasingly elaborate obi knots was practicing the grace and elegance expected of her mother. Their smaller kimonos were a dress rehearsal for life, a world of bright colors and protective charms that slowly gave way to the more subdued and structured palette of adulthood, teaching them the language of social identity long before they could even read. The very fabric of feudal Japanese society was woven from the threads of its textiles, a tangible hierarchy you could feel with your fingertips. For the elite, the ultimate expression of status was silk, a material so luxurious it was often considered priceless. The production of silk, known as sericulture, was a painstaking and revered process. It began with the cultivation of mulberry trees, whose leaves were the sole food source for silkworms. These tiny caterpillars would then spin their precious cocoons, each one yielding a single, continuous filament of silk that could be an astonishing 1,000 meters long. The process of carefully unraveling these cocoons in hot water and spinning the delicate threads together into a strong yarn was a specialized skill, often the domain of women in farming households who would raise silkworms as a vital side income. The resulting raw silk thread was then handed over to master weavers, who transformed it into breathtaking fabrics. The epicenter of this silk weaving artistry was Kyoto's Nishijin district, a name that literally means Western Camp, dating back to its establishment by weavers relocated after the Onin War in the 15th century. Nishijin ori, or Nishijin weaving, became synonymous with the absolute pinnacle of textile luxury. Weavers in this district employed incredibly complex techniques to create ornate brocades. They used specialized looms that allowed for the meticulous integration of different colored weft threads, often including threads wrapped in thin strips of gold or silver leaf. This created dazzling patterns of flowers, cranes, turtles, and geometric designs directly into the fabric itself. The rustle of a Nishijin brocade kimono was the sound of unimaginable wealth and refined taste, a sensory experience that immediately set the aristocracy apart from everyone else. But for the overwhelming majority of the population, such luxury was an impossible dream. Their world was clad in the sturdy, humble fibers of hemp and cotton. Hemp or assar was the ancient staple, a tough plant that grew reliably in poor soil and could be processed into a strong, durable thread. The making of hemp cloth was a labor of love and endurance. The stalks were harvested, soaked in water to soften them, then beaten to separate the fibrous inner bark from the woody core. These fibers were then spun by hand into a rough, sturdy yarn that was woven into a fabric that was breathable, hard-wearing, and perfect for the long, hot days of manual labor in the field. It was, however, notoriously coarse and could be uncomfortable against the skin. The arrival of cotton, or momen, in the Sengoku period was nothing short of a revolution for the common people. Initially a costly import, domestic cotton cultivation took off, and by the Edo period it had become widely available. Cotton was a game changer, softer, more insulating, and more absorbent than hemp. It was also easier to dye, famously holding the deep indigo blue that became the uniform of the working class. The process of creating cotton cloth, from planting the fluffy bolls to ginning, spinning, and weaving, became a cornerstone of rural economies. Regions began to develop their own specialties. The Okinawa Islands were famous for their vibrant bashifu, a cloth woven from banana plant fibers, while the remote northern areas produced sturdy fabrics from elm bark fibers. These regional textiles were not just practical. They were points of local pride and identity, often traded or sold as valuable commodities. The influence of trade, particularly with China and the Asian mainland, continuously fed new life into Japanese textile arts. Chinese silks had always been highly prized imports, bringing with them new weaving patterns, dye techniques, and aesthetic ideas that Japanese artisans would adapt and make their own. This cross-cultural exchange ensured that Japanese fashion, while deeply traditional, was never entirely static. The economic impact of textile production was enormous. Beyond the famed Nishijin weavers, countless households across Japan were engaged in some part of the process, raising silkworms, spinning thread, weaving cloth, or sewing garments. This cottage industry formed a vast and essential network that clothed the nation. From the emperor in his layered silks to the farmer in his practical indigo cotton. Each thread a testament to the skill and resilience of the hands that made it. Yet amid the rigid rules of daily dress, the calendar was dotted with moments of sanctioned escape, where the usual social codes were temporarily set aside for celebration and ceremony. These special occasions provided a vital release valve, offering everyone, from the wealthiest daimyo to the humblest farmer, a chance to step into a more vibrant, symbolic, and often joyous version of themselves through clothing. Whether it was a sacred shrine festival, a wedding, or the highly codified tea ceremony, the attire for these events was a world apart from everyday wear, bursting with color, meaning, and a collective spirit that often blurred the hard lines of class. For the common people, the most exuberant expression of this was found in the local matsuri, or shrine festivals. These vibrant events, dedicated to petitioning the gods for a good harvest, or thanking them for past blessings, were a riot of sound, movement, and color. The uniform of participation was the happy coat, a straight-lined, hip-length jacket typically made of durable cotton. While a worker might wear a plain, dark happy as a uniform during the week, the festival happy was a different creature entirely. Dyed in brilliant indigo, deep black, or vibrant brown, it would be boldly emblazoned on the back with the mon, or crest, of the local shrine, the neighborhood association, or the team of men who would carry the heavy makoshi portable shrine through the streets. Wearing this matching happy was a powerful declaration of community belonging, a visual statement that for this day, individual identity was secondary to being part of a whole, moving and working in unison to honor the gods. The sensation of being part of a swirling, chanting sea of people, all dressed in identical, vibrant coats, created an unforgettable feeling of unity and shared purpose. While festivals were for the community, the wedding day was the ultimate personal celebration. And for a bride, it was her moment to become a living emblem of luck, prosperity, and happiness. This was achieved through the breathtaking shiramuku, an all-white ensemble worn for the main ceremony. The white symbolized not only purity and a new beginning, but also the bride's willingness to be dyed into the colors of her new family's traditions, a potent and poetic surrender of her old life. Over this pristine white kimono, she would wear the magnificent uchikake, a heavily padded outer robe that is perhaps the most opulent garment in all of Japanese history. The uchikake is never tied shut. It is designed to be worn open, trailing dramatically behind the bride like a river of silk. It is a canvas for some of the most exquisite artistry imaginable, often embroidered with gold and silver threads in patterns that are dense with blessing. You might see pairs of cranes, symbols of longevity and marital fidelity, or tortoises bearing lush moss on their shells, representing a long life filled with prosperity. Flowing rivers, blooming peonies, and rising phoenixes all tell a story of a future overflowing with good fortune. For a commoner's daughter, this might be the one day in her entire life she would ever wear such a magnificent silk garment, often rented or borrowed for the occasion, making it all the more potent and magical. In stark contrast to the vibrant spectacle of the wedding was the subdued, profound elegance required for the tea ceremony, known as soro. This was not attire for celebration, but for contemplation, a practice where every element was refined to eliminate distraction and foster a state of mindful tranquility. The clothing, therefore, was the antithesis of the bridal uchikake. Participants would wear kimonos of the most restrained and humble appearance, often in muted earth tones like olive green, charcoal gray, or russet brown. The patterns were small, subtle, and geometric, or featured quiet, natural motifs like dewdrops or faint wisps of grass. The fabric was always matte, never shiny, to avoid any glare that might disturb the serene atmosphere. The obi was tied in a simple, flat knot, and the sleeves were of a modest length. This was fashion as a form of respect for the host, for the other guests, and for the sacredness of the practice itself. It demonstrated an understanding that true refinement wasn't about opulence, but about harmony, humility, and being fully present in the moment. These ceremonial occasions provided a fascinating social loophole. The sumptuary laws, so strict in daily life, were often relaxed for festivals and weddings, allowing commoners to wear finer materials and brighter colors than would otherwise be permitted. A merchant's wife might not be allowed to wear a figured silk kimono to a party, but she could absolutely wear one to her son's wedding. This temporary permission to cross social boundaries through clothing made these events incredibly important. They offered a taste of a different life, a chance to experience, however briefly, the feel of exquisite silk and the weight of symbolic adornment. It was a safety valve that reinforced the social order even as it seemed to defy it, because everyone returned to their everyday uniforms once the festival ended or the wedding guests went home. In this way, ceremonial dress became a powerful, cyclical reminder of both community bonds and personal aspirations, woven into the very fabric of life's most meaningful moments. And it was in this world of strict codes and hidden meanings that a true fashion revolution quietly took root, not in the palaces of power, but in the bustling, vibrant streets of a new city, Edo. For nearly 250 years, Japan was largely closed off from the world under the Tokugawa shogunate, a period of enforced peace known as the Edo period. With no major wars to fight, the samurai class found themselves becoming administrators, while a new social force emerged with unprecedented influence, the wealthy merchant class, or chunin. Legally, they were stuck at the very bottom of the social hierarchy, below the samurai, the farmers, and even the artisans. But they had something the cash-strapped samurai often lacked: vast amounts of money. This tension between low social status and high economic power created a pressure cooker of sartorial creativity, giving birth to a consumer culture and a fashion scene so dynamic it would forever change Japanese style. The shogunate, ever wary of this new wealth upsetting the natural order, doubled down on sumptuary laws, issuing edicts that dictated everything from the type of fabric a merchant could wear to the number of colors in her obi. But where there's a will to express oneself, there's a way. The merchants became masters of the sartorial loophole, developing a whole language of hidden luxury. The most famous trick was the art of the unassuming outer garment. A wealthy townswoman might step outside in a simple, demure kimono of plain, legal cotton or hemp, perfectly complying with the law. But the inside lining of that very same kimono would be a breathtaking, explosive panorama of the most expensive figured silk, lavishly dyed and embroidered with scenes from popular novels or dramatic kabuki plays. This private luxury, known only to the wearer and her closest confidants, was a delicious secret, a way to enjoy their wealth without provoking the authorities. They also turned their attention to the one item with fewer restrictions, the obi. As we discussed, this sash exploded in size and opulence, becoming a massive, brocade canvas for displaying wealth and artistry. Other subtle flexes included exquisitely detailed inner garments, incredibly fine tabi socks, and elaborately crafted accessories like intricately carved netsuke toggles and in-row medicine cases that hung from the obi. Their fashion was a game of cat and mouse, a silent declaration that while the law could control what was seen, it could not control what was known. This burgeoning consumer culture was fueled and reflected by two powerful new engines of trendsetting: the kabuki theater and the ukiyo-e woodblock print. The kabuki district was the equivalent of today's Fashion Week runway. The actors were the ultimate celebrities, and their flamboyant, dramatic stage costumes became instant must-haves. When a leading onagata, a male actor specializing in female roles, wore a new pattern or a novel obi tying style, it would be splashed across the city in woodblock prints and copied by fashionable women within weeks. These ukiyo-e, or pictures of the floating world, were the mass media of their day. They weren't just art. They were lookbooks, fashion plates, and celebrity gossip magazines all rolled into one. Prints depicting beautiful courtesans and stylish townspeople at leisure created and disseminated the ideal of the ikki aesthetic, a cool, refined, and slightly edgy sensibility that valued sophistication over overt showiness. People would literally bring these prints to their fabric dealers to commission kimono in the exact same patterns worn by their favorite stars. For the first time, fashion trends could spread like wildfire across the city, creating a shared visual culture among the common people that was entirely separate from the staid traditions of the court and the samurai. This was the birth of street style, a vibrant, pulsing, and endlessly creative expression of urban life that proved even the most rigid society cannot contain the human desire for beauty and identity. In the vibrant, pleasure-seeking world of Edo's entertainment districts, known as the Kaukai or Flower and Willow world, two groups of women stood as the undisputed, albeit controversial, idols of style: the Geisha and the Warren, the highest-ranking courtesans. Their fashion was a universe away from the subdued elegance of the tea ceremony or the rigid uniforms of the samurai. It was a spectacular, living art form designed to captivate, allure, and command astronomical fees. While often conflated by outsiders, their attire and the philosophies behind it were strikingly different, creating a visual language that those in the know could read instantly. The Warren, the pinnacle of the courtesan hierarchy, were walking fantasies of unattainable luxury. Their appearance was deliberately exaggerated, theatrical, and designed to overwhelm the senses. The most iconic element was their obi. Unlike any other woman in Japan, the Warren tied her lavish, brocade obi in a grandiose knot at the front. This style, known as darari obi or dangling obi, was a holdover from an earlier fashion and served a very specific purpose. As she walked, the ends of the obi, which could be several feet long, would trail behind her with majestic grace. This front knot also made it logistically easier to frequently change her exquisite kimono for clients. Her outfit was a symphony of excess. She wore multiple kimono layered in a way that, while less structured than the ju-ni-hitoe, was no less opulent, with collars pulled low to reveal a painted nape and multiple vibrant underlayers. Her wooden geta were towering koma geta, with a single central tooth that forced her into a slow, swaying, pigeon-toed walk known as ohanachi, a hypnotic gait that was as much a part of her performance as her appearance. Every aspect was designed to create a breathtaking, almost otherworldly spectacle of beauty. In contrast, the Geisha, whose name literally means person of the arts, cultivated a radically different aesthetic. Where the warren was a fantastical dream, the Geisha was the epitome of refined, attainable reality. Her power lay not in overt seduction, but in suggesting exquisite taste and artistic mastery. A fully fledged Geisha, a Geiko as they are known in Kyoto, favored a sublime and subtle elegance. Her kimono, while made of the finest silks, were often in more reserved, sophisticated colors and patterns, especially as she matured. A first-year Meiko, an apprentice Geisha, would wear more vibrant colors and longer, dangling sleeves to signify her youth. But the overall effect was one of artistic grace, not theatrical display. Her obi was tied in a large, intricate knot at the back. Just like any other respectable woman of the time, though often more elaborate, the true focus was on the subtle details, the specific seasonal motif of her hairpin, the way her white makeup accentuated the line of her neck, the precise shade of her inner collar. Her genius was in the art of suggestion, making her style the aspirational ideal for the everyday fashionable woman of Edo. Despite their outside social status, these women became the most powerful trendsetters and influencers of their era. The warren, with their dramatic, exaggerated looks, set the extreme high fashion trends. A new pattern or obi style, debuted by a famous courtesan, would be splashed across woodblock prints and quickly trickle down. But it was the Geisha who truly mastered wearable art. Because their style was based on a believable, hyper-refined version of everyday elegance, it was far easier for the wives and daughters of wealthy merchants to emulate. When a celebrated Geisha adopted a new, subtler way of tying her obi, or a novel color combination for a specific month, it would be copied by thousands of women across the city almost overnight. They were the walking, breathing embodiment of the Ikki ideal: cool, sophisticated, and emotionally restrained. Woodblock artists like Kitagawa Utamaro immortalized their styles, turning these prints into the fashion magazines of the day. In a society that legally suppressed their status, these women wielded immense cultural power through the silent language of silk and thread, defining Edo style for centuries to come. This deep connection to the natural world meant that getting dressed each morning was an act of harmonizing with the environment. The very fabrics and construction of a kimono were masterfully engineered for climate control long before such a term existed. During the humid, oppressive heat of a Japanese summer, the solution was the hitoe, a single-layer, unlined kimono. Made from the most breathable fabrics like fine linen or lightweight, gauzy silk known as robe, the hitoe allowed for maximum air circulation. Its beauty was in its simplicity and coolness, a welcome reprieve when the air grew thick and still. But as the vibrant greens of summer faded to the fiery reds and golds of autumn, a distinct rustling could be heard throughout homes and storehouses. It was the sound of koromogi, the biannual ritual of changing over the wardrobe to align with the new season. Officially recognized by the imperial court and later adopted by all levels of society, Koromugi happened twice a year, around the 1st of June to welcome summer garments, and around the 1st of October to bring out the winter ones. This wasn't a mere suggestion, it was a cultural rhythm, a shared national experience that synchronized daily life with the turning of the earth. Chests were opened, and the lightweight hitoe were carefully folded and stored away, making room for the season's main feature, the awase. The awase was the winter kimono, a garment of profound practicality and warmth. Unlike the single-layer hitoe, the awase was lined with a layer of soft silk crepe or cotton batting secured between the outer fabric and a separate inner lining. For those who could afford it, this padding could be incredibly luxurious, creating a snug, insulating barrier against the biting winter cold. The weight and thickness of the fabric itself also changed, with winter kimono being woven from heavier, denser silk threads. And it wasn't just the main robe. Even the underkimono and the all-important obi sash had their winter versions, becoming thicker and more substantial to provide an extra layer of protection. Accessories became essential tools for comfort, transforming from simple decorations into lifesavers in harsh weather. The jaban, a short coat or jacket worn over the kimono, became a daily necessity for everyone venturing outside. For those exposed to the elements for long periods, like merchants or travelers, a heavy mino, a cloak woven from straw or hemp, offered remarkable protection from wind and rain. Indoors, the kotatsu, a low table with a heat source underneath covered by a heavy quilt, was the center of home life, and people would slip their robed legs underneath it, trapping the precious warmth. Small handheld ceramic pots filled with hot charcoal, known as tia berry or hand warmers, could be tucked into the sleeves of the kimono, providing a portable source of heat. Even the most functional items were imbued with a sense of seasonal poetry. Umbrellas or wagasa were made from waterproofed paper and bamboo, but they were often decorated with patterns that reflected the time of year. Perhaps maple leaves for autumn or snowflake motifs for winter. The deep, practical connection to nature was perhaps most beautifully expressed through the continued use of seasonal colors and motifs. A winter kimono wouldn't just be a dark color for practicality. It would feature a pattern of camellia flowers, which bloom in the cold, or a subtle design of snow-laden bamboo, weaving a reminder of nature's stark beauty into the very fabric meant to defend against its chill. From the lightest summer silk to the heaviest padded robe, clothing was a dialogue with the seasons, a testament to the ingenuity of adapting with grace to the relentless, beautiful cycle of the natural world. But the language of appearance in feudal Japan extended far beyond the robe and the obi, down to the very surface of the skin and the smallest objects one carried. The final, crucial layer of identity was expressed through the meticulous art of makeup and the purposeful selection of accessories, each element a deliberate brushstroke in a person's public portrait. For the nobility, this was a world of dramatic transformation, where the face itself became a mask of ideal beauty, separate from the sun-touched realities of everyday life. The most iconic symbol of this aristocratic ideal was the oshiroi, a stark white powder made from rice flour or lead-based paint. Applied over the entire face, neck and chest, this flawless white canvas served multiple purposes. It erased all blemishes, wrinkles and shadows, creating a smooth, doll-like visage that was considered the height of refinement and otherworldly beauty. In the dim, flickering light of candle-lit palace chambers, this white face would glow with an ethereal luminescence, setting the aristocracy visually apart from the common people, whose skin was marked by labor under the sun. This practice was so deeply ingrained that a woman's social standing could be gauged by the purity and consistency of her white makeup. For married women of the highest rank, this striking canvas was often completed with a practice that seems startling to modern eyes. Ohaguro, the blackening of the teeth. Using a solution of fermented iron filings steeped in vinegar or tea, women would stain their teeth a glossy, pitch-black color. While it may have had some practical benefit in preventing tooth decay, its true purpose was overwhelmingly social and aesthetic. Ohaguro was a powerful symbol of marital status and maturity. Commonly done by court ladies and samurai women upon marriage, the stark contrast of black teeth against the white powder was not considered grotesque, but profoundly beautiful. A sign of a woman who had left the innocence of girlhood behind to enter the esteemed world of wifehood and motherhood. Alongside this, eyebrows were often completely plucked out, and then redrawn higher on the forehead with delicate brushstrokes of sumi ink, sometimes in graceful, rounded shapes that gave the face a perpetually serene and placid expression. For men of the court and samurai class, a more subdued version of this grooming was also common, with light powder to create a refined complexion and neatly defined eyebrows, emphasizing a life free from manual labor. In stark contrast, the common people had neither the time nor the legal permission for such elaborate cosmetic rituals. Their lives of physical labor made the delicate, easily smudged oshoroi entirely impractical. Instead, their relationship with beauty was one of subtle enhancement and protection. Women might use a light dusting of rice powder to reduce shine on a hot day, or apply a faint touch of natural beni red from safflower to their lips and cheeks for a touch of color during a festival or special occasion. The primary focus for all classes, however, was on the hair, which was always kept meticulously clean and neatly styled according to one's station, as it was considered one of the most important features of a person's appearance. Beyond the face, accessories provided another rich vocabulary for personal expression, blending sheer practicality with deep symbolism. The folding fan, or sensu, was a masterpiece of functional design. For a courtier, it was an essential tool for communication, used in a subtle language of gestures to convey messages across a crowded room without speaking a word. A flick of the wrist or the specific way it was held could signal interest, dismissal, or a secret greeting. For everyone else, it was a simple, indispensable relief from the stifling summer heat. For women, the beautifully crafted hairpin, or kanzashi, was far more than a fastener. Made from materials like tortoiseshell, jade, lacquered wood, or silver, these pins were often ornate works of art. Their designs were a silent language. A pin shaped like a plum blossom symbolized hope and perseverance, while a crane promised longevity and good fortune. For a man, especially a wealthy townsman, the most important accessories were those that solved a very practical problem. The kimono had no pockets. The elegant solution was the development of the inro and netsuke. An inro was a small, stacked lacquered box used to carry medicine, seals, or other personal items. It was suspended from the obi sash by a cord. To prevent it from falling off, the cord was threaded through a netsuke, a small, exquisitely carved toggle made from ivory, wood, or bone. The netsuke acted as an anchor, resting on top of the obi. These tiny sculptures became a hugely popular art form for men, with subjects ranging from mythical creatures and gods to animals and everyday figures, each one a reflection of the owner's personal taste, wealth, and sense of humor. Every item, from the white mask of makeup to the smallest carved toggle, was a conscious choice, a final punctuation mark that completed the silent but eloquent sentence of one's social identity. For centuries, the islands of Japan had been a world unto themselves, a closed system where fashion evolved according to its own intricate internal logic. But in the 1850s, that long isolation was shattered. The arrival of American Commodore Matthew Perry's infamous black ships in Edo Bay did more than just force open the nation's ports. It unleashed a tidal wave of cultural shock that would forever change how Japanese people dressed. Those first glimpses of Western naval officers in their woolen uniforms, tailored trousers, and polished leather boots were a vision from another planet. To the samurai officials who met them, these foreign garments were more than just strange. They were a terrifyingly clear symbol of a technological and military power that Japan could no longer ignore. The very construction of the clothing spoke of a different worldview, form-fitting, pragmatic, and designed for a world of rapid movement and industrial might. A stark contrast to the flowing, layered robes that signified contemplation, tradition, and social place. This confrontation sparked an immediate and pragmatic response from the very top. Realizing that modernizing the military was essential for survival, the shogunate and several forward-thinking regional domains took a radical step. They began to adopt Western-style uniforms for their soldiers. The Satsuma domain, one of the most powerful, was among the first to equip its troops with modern rifles and the dark, woolen uniforms to match. This was a seismic shift. For a samurai, his armor and his everyday kamishimo were not just clothes. They were the physical embodiment of his honor, his heritage, and his very soul. To exchange them for the anonymous, mass-produced uniform of a foreign power was psychologically jarring. It was the first major crack in the sartorial armor of feudalism, a quiet admission that the old ways might not be enough to meet this new challenge. For the first time, high-ranking officials and diplomats were also compelled to don Western tailcoats and top hats when engaging with foreign representatives. Photographs from the time capture this profound cultural dissonance. Stern-faced samurai with their traditional shaved pates and topknots awkwardly stuffed into high-collared shirts and stiff coats, their postures rigid and unfamiliar in the constricting new garb. They were men caught between two worlds, their clothing a literal costume for a new, uncertain era they did not yet understand. This period of experimentation previewed the total upheaval that was to come with the Meiji Restoration in 1868. The new government, determined to transform Japan into a modern nation-state equal to the Western powers, saw clothing reform as a vital tool of policy. The old sartorial codes were directly linked to the feudal system they had just overthrown. To modernize, Japan needed to look modern. In 1871, the emperor himself, the divine figurehead of the entire nation, made an astonishing symbolic break with the past. He appeared in public wearing Western-style military attire, his topknot cut off and his hair cut short in the Western fashion. This was not a mere suggestion, it was a powerful command. The following year, the government issued an official decree encouraging all officials and military personnel to adopt Western dress, effectively making the old samurai attire obsolete for public function. The cultural clash was immense and deeply personal. For many, especially the former samurai class, cutting off the topknot was the most painful order of all. The chonmage was the ultimate symbol of their identity, and shearing it off felt like a public castration, a surrender of their very manhood and heritage. Cartoons and newspapers of the era are filled with satirical images and anxious debates about these so-called danpatsu, or hair-cut orders. People struggled with the practicalities of the new fashion. Western shoes were agonizingly tight for feet, accustomed to the open freedom of geta and tabai. The concept of sitting on chairs in tight trousers was alien and uncomfortable compared to the seated postures on tatami mats that flowing hakama were designed for. Yet there was also a burgeoning fascination with the new monp trousers, the practical, baggy pants worn by peasant women, saw a surge in popularity as they somewhat resembled Western women's bloomers, offering a bridge between the old and the new. The kimono did not disappear, but it began to recede from the forefront of public life, becoming recast as primarily domestic wear, for ceremonies, and as a symbol of a cultural identity that was now under negotiation. What emerged was not a simple replacement of one style by another, but a fascinating and often awkward period of coexistence and fusion, known as wafuku and yofuku Japanese clothing, and Western clothing. It became common to see a man wearing a formal Western-style frock coat paired with a traditional hakama, or a woman attending a state event in an elaborate Western gown while still wearing her hair in a classic shimoda maid. This sartorial layering mirrored the nation's own frantic effort to graft modern Western institutions onto a deeply rooted Japanese spirit. The streets of Tokyo became a living tableau of this transformation, a chaotic and vibrant fashion show where the silhouettes of centuries past now walked alongside the tailored suits and bustled dresses of the future. This great clothing reform was perhaps the most visible sign of a revolution that reached into every corner of life, proving that a change in what people wear can be one of the most powerful and unsettling indicators of a world being remade. And so, within this rigid framework of rules and restrictions, a fascinating social game emerged, a silent battle of wits and wallets fought not with swords, but with stitches and silks. The sumptuary laws created the playing field, but they could not contain the human desire to express status, individuality, and taste. For the wealthy merchant class of Edo, legally barred from the most overt displays of wealth, fashion became a sophisticated language of subtlety and insider knowledge. This is where we encounter a uniquely Japanese aesthetic ideal, the concept of ikki. Ikki wasn't about being flashy or expensive. It was about possessing a cool, restrained, and subtly seductive elegance. It was the art of suggesting wealth and refinement rather than shouting it, a knowing wink to those with the eyes to see it. A townsman might wear an outer robe of a soba, permitted dark indigo cotton, but the inside lining would be a breathtaking, hidden explosion of the most brilliant and expensive silk brocade, perhaps depicting a dramatic scene from a popular kabuki play. This private luxury, known only to the wearer and their closest companions, was a delicious rebellion. It was a way to enjoy the finest things in life while technically staying within the letter of the law, a sartorial secret that provided immense personal satisfaction. This pursuit of subtlety extended to every conceivable detail of the garment. Since the overall form and color were restricted, ingenuity flourished in the craftsmanship. The stitching itself became a canvas for status. Tiny, impossibly even hand stitches along the seam of a collar, visible only upon very close inspection, demonstrated that the wearer could afford a tailor of exceptional, time-consuming skill. The way a garment was finished on the inside, with perfectly matched patterns at the seams and impeccably clean edges, spoke volumes about the resources spent on its creation. Even the choice of a seemingly plain fabric could be a flex. A subtle, woven in textural pattern like shibori, thread tie-dye, or a rare type of slubbed silk, known as tsumugi, was far more expensive and admired than a simple, flat weave. It was a quiet boast of connoisseurship, an understanding that true luxury often lies in the details invisible to the untrained eye. Perhaps the most socially acceptable and powerful way to display status, however, was through the use of the family crest, or mon. These elegant, minimalist designs, often based on natural motifs like paulownia leaves, circling cranes, or geometric patterns, were originally the exclusive domain of the nobility and samurai families. They served as heraldic symbols, instantly identifying the wearer's lineage and allegiance. But as the merchant class grew in influence, they too began to adopt and commission their own mon. Having a recognized family crest, even a newly created one, was a powerful way to project an image of established legacy and respectability, borrowing the prestige of the warrior class. The number of crests on a garment was a direct indicator of formality and importance. A kimono with 5 family crests, one on the back of the neck and one on each sleeve, was reserved for the most formal occasions, a clear signal of the wearer's serious intent and social standing. This allowed a wealthy merchant to navigate the social hierarchy. He could wear a modest, legal fabric, but adorn it with multiple crests, using tradition itself as a tool to elevate his perceived status in a way that was difficult for authorities to challenge. This silent competition reached its peak in the vibrant pleasure districts of Edo, where the courtesans and geisha were the undisputed trendsetters. They were artists of iki, masters of suggestion. A geisha might wear a kimono in a seemingly subdued color palette, but the dye technique would be excruciatingly complex, requiring 20 separate steps to achieve that perfect, dusty shade of blue-gray. Her obi might be tied in a novel, intricate style that would be copied by fashionable townswomen within weeks. The wealthy merchant wives, who were the primary patrons of these districts, engaged in a constant, quiet arms race through their attire, using their clothing to communicate their husband's success and their own refined taste. They couldn't outlaw cleverness, so the battlefield shifted from the broad strokes of fabric and color to the microscopic details of thread, stitch, and symbol. It was a testament to a pervasive cultural truth, that the most powerful and enduring displays of status are often those that are whispered, not shouted, understood by a knowing few rather than observed by the oblivious many. Behind every stunning silk brocade and every subtly dyed linen was a master artisan, an individual who dedicated their entire life to perfecting a single, breathtaking skill. These weavers, dyers, and embroiderers were the hidden architects of feudal Japan's visual language, their hands transforming simple threads into social codes and works of art. Their work wasn't just a job, it was a sacred calling, a discipline that required not just talent, but an almost unimaginable patience and devotion. To become a master dyer, for instance, could take a decade or more of apprenticeship, learning to distinguish between hundreds of subtle shades that would be indistinguishable to the untrained eye, each with its own poetic name and specific use. These crafts were the beating heart of Japan's cultural heritage, passed down through generations within tightly knit family workshops or guilds, where secrets were guarded as closely as any samurai's battle strategy. Consider the mesmerizing process of yuzen dyeing, a technique that revolutionized kimono design during the Edo period. Named after the legendary painter Miyazaki Yuzen, this method allowed for the creation of complex, painterly scenes with sharp, undiffused edges, something previously impossible. The artisan would begin by sketching an elaborate design onto the white silk with a special blue dye that would later wash out. Then, using a small, funnel-like tool, they would carefully outline every single element of the design with a paste made from rice flour. This resistant paste acted like a dam, preventing dyes from bleeding into adjacent areas. Once the paste dried, the artist would then hand paint the entire design within those barriers, using delicate brushes to apply a spectrum of natural dyes. This was a painstaking, section-by-section process, often requiring the cloth to be stretched on a frame for weeks. After the painting was complete, the entire piece was steamed to set the colors, and then the resistant paste was washed away, revealing the crisp, white outlines and the vibrant, detailed masterpiece within. A single kimono could represent hundreds of hours of concentrated, flawless work. Equally revered was the art of shibori, the precursor to what we now know as tie-dye, though elevated to an astonishing level of sophistication. Unlike the random patterns of the 1960, Japanese shibori was a precise science of resistance. Artisans used an array of techniques to bind, stitch, fold, or wrap tiny sections of cloth before dipping it into dye vats. The bound areas would resist the dye, creating patterns when the bindings were removed. There were countless styles: kanoko shibori, which mimicked the spotted fawn by tying thousands of tiny knots by hand; miura shibori, a looping technique that created a delicate, water-like pattern; and kumo shibori, a precise pleating and binding method that resulted in intricate spider-web designs. The complexity is almost hard to fathom. For a high-end garment, an artisan might spend months tying and untying millions of minuscule knots, their skill measured by the perfect consistency and placement of each and every one. The result was a textile of profound depth and texture, a garment that revealed new details the closer you looked. For the ultimate display of opulence, nothing could surpass the application of gold and silver leaf, known as sorehaku or kingin zome. This was a technique reserved for the most formal and expensive garments, those worn by the highest ranks of nobility, or for the most sacred ceremonies. The process began with the creation of an adhesive paste, often made from persimmon tannin or lacquer. Using stencils or freehand, the artisan would carefully paint the design onto the fabric with this sticky paste. Then, while the paste was still tacky, they would lay sheets of gossamer thin gold or silver leaf over the entire area, or use a brush to dust on gold powder. The precious metal would adhere only to the pasted areas. After the delicate operation of brushing away the excess, the design would shine forth in brilliant, metallic relief against the silk. This wasn't just decoration. It was a statement of divine level power and wealth. The wearer was literally clothed in treasure, the light catching the gold with every movement and shimmering like a living entity. The preservation of these techniques was a matter of national pride and identity, with knowledge transferred from parent to child in a continuous, unbroken chain that stretched back centuries, ensuring that the beauty of the past was never lost to the future. Yet even within this deeply gendered sartorial system, the lines were not always so rigidly drawn. History offers us fascinating exceptions, particularly the formidable figure of the unamasha, or female samurai. These women, often wives or daughters of high-ranking lords, were trained in martial arts and sometimes fought alongside men to defend their households and domains. Their attire was a remarkable hybrid, a fusion of masculine functionality and feminine identity. They did not simply wear standard male armor, they adapted it. A female samurai would don a standard dumaru or haramaki cuirass for protection, but it was often tailored to accommodate a woman's physique. More significantly, they frequently paired this functional armor with the brilliantly colored trousers of a woman's formal hakama, creating a striking and unique silhouette on the battlefield. Their helmets might be less ostentatious than those of their male counterparts, but they would often wear their hair styled in a manner that was both practical for combat and recognizably feminine, sometimes tying it back with brightly colored cords. The most famous example, the legendary Tomo Gozen, was described in historical texts as being both a beauty of stunning appearance and a warrior of peerless strength, her attire perfectly mirroring this dual nature. The existence of the unamasha reminds us that while clothing was a powerful tool for enforcing gender norms, human ingenuity and necessity could always find a way to rewrite the rules, even if only for a moment, creating a space where a woman could be both protected and beautiful, both a warrior and herself. Walk through the streets of modern Tokyo today, and you might see a fascinating sartorial time capsule unfolding before your eyes. Amidst the sea of contemporary suits and global fast fashion, you'll spot a woman in a crisp yukata, a casual summer kimono, on her way to a fireworks festival. You might notice the sharp, wide-legged silhouette of hakama trousers at a university graduation ceremony, or the breathtaking vision of a bride in a white shiramuku during a traditional wedding. These aren't just costumes or historical reenactments. They are living, breathing threads connecting the complex social codes of feudal Japan directly to the present moment. The legacy of that era is not stored away in museums. It is woven into the very fabric of modern Japanese life, continuing to communicate identity, respect for tradition, and a unique aesthetic sensibility that has captivated the world. This endurance is most visible during life's most significant milestones. The Japanese wedding ceremony remains a powerful stage for the sartorial drama of the past. Many brides still choose to wear the shiramuku, the all-white kimono and trailing uchikeko robe that symbolized purity and a new beginning for a samurai's daughter centuries ago. The groom often compliments her in a mantsuki, a formal black kimono adorned with his family crests, worn over hakama, an ensemble that would have been perfectly familiar to an Edo period samurai attending his lord's court. These choices are a profound statement of cultural continuity, a way to anchor one of life's most important transitions in the deep, resonant power of tradition. Similarly, the coming-of-age ceremony known as Seijin no Hai, where 20-year-olds celebrate their entry into adulthood, is a stunning public display of this living history. Young women invest in or rent exquisitely colorful furisode, the long-sleeved kimono once worn by unmarried women of the merchant and samurai classes to signal their availability. The vibrant patterns and flowing sleeves are a direct link to the festive fashions of Edo's pleasure districts, now repurposed as a universal symbol of youth and celebration. But the influence extends far beyond formal wear. The principles of feudal aesthetics continue to shape modern Japanese design on a fundamental level. The concept of iki, that ideal of subdued, cool, and subtle elegance, is still the gold standard for taste. You can see it in the clean lines of a Muji product, the minimalist interior of a luxury apartment, or the impeccable cut of a Yohji Yamamoto garment. Designers like Issey Miyake have built global brands by reinterpreting the very essence of the kimono's form. Miyake's iconic Pleats Please line, with its focus on comfort, freedom of movement, and sculptural, uncut cloth, is a direct philosophical descendant of the kimono's T-shaped, straight-seam design. His experiments with flat pieces of fabric that transform into beautiful, wearable shapes echo the genius of a garment that was never tailored to a specific body, but was instead shaped by the art of folding and tying. This dialogue between past and present has ignited a vibrant streetwear scene where traditional elements are playfully deconstructed and remixed. It's not uncommon to see a young Tokaiite pairing a vintage happy coat, the very same kind worn by festival goers in Edo, with a pair of modern denim jeans. Designers incorporate sashiko stitching, a functional reinforcement technique from peasant farmers' workwear, into high-end jackets for its textural beauty. The iconic patterns of feudal Japan, Seigeiha waves, Asanoha hemp leaves, and Shippo circles, are screen-printed onto hoodies and sneakers, making ancient symbols of good fortune and resilience part of a contemporary urban uniform. This isn't just a trend, it's a form of cultural conversation, a way for a new generation to wear their history with pride and irreverence, making it relevant to their own lives. Perhaps the most heartening aspect of this legacy is the passionate revival of the traditional crafts that nearly vanished in the rush toward 20th century modernization. The artisanal skills that produced feudal fashion were dangerously close to extinction just a few decades ago. Today, there is a renewed appreciation for the incredible work of master weavers, dyers, and embroiderers. Organizations and government initiatives now work to designate these artisans as living national treasures, ensuring their knowledge is preserved and passed on. Young people are increasingly apprenticing themselves to these masters, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to connect with this profound aspect of their heritage. When a modern consumer purchases a new kimono, they are often investing in a piece of this living history, supporting a chain of craftsmanship that stretches back over 1,000 years. The value is no longer just in the garment's beauty, but in the story of its creation, the hands that dyed the threads, the loom that wove them, and the cultural memory they hold. So why do these styles endure with such power? The answer lies in something much deeper than nostalgia. Feudal Japanese fashion offers a timeless and increasingly rare alternative to the values of mass production and fast consumption. In a world of disposable clothing, the kimono represents the opposite ideal. Garments cared for, repaired, and often passed down through generations. Its straight seam construction means it can be completely taken apart, washed flat and reassembled, extending its life for decades. The aesthetic principles of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection and impermanence, encourage a deeper relationship with the objects we own, appreciating the way a fabric softens with age or a pattern fades gracefully. These are not just clothing lessons. They are philosophical ones, teaching respect for resources, an appreciation for slow, deliberate creation, and an understanding that true beauty often reveals itself over time. The continued presence of these feudal forms in modern Japan is a quiet but powerful reminder of a different way of being in the world, one that values identity, artistry, and continuity in an ever-changing global landscape. So we've journeyed together through the silent, eloquent world of feudal Japanese attire, from the weightless, layered silks of the Heian court to the pragmatic indigo hemp of the farmer in his field. We've seen how every single thread was imbued with meaning, how a color could signify rank, how a fold could signal allegiance, and how a single wide sash could become a canvas for rebellion. This was never merely clothing. It was a complex, unspoken language. It was a social map, a legal document, a spiritual practice, and a profound art form, all woven together. Your place in the world wasn't just assigned to you. It was worn by you every single day in a brilliant, stifling, and endlessly creative display of identity. What's truly astonishing is how this sartorial DNA continues to pulse through modern life, both in Japan and across the globe. The principles that guided an Edo period artisan, the respect for natural materials, the celebration of subtle beauty over loud extravagance, the belief that clothing should harmonize with the seasons, these ideas have found new expression. You can see it in the architectural drape of a modern fashion designer's gown, in the minimalist aesthetic of a tech product, or in the quiet luxury of a well-crafted garment designed to last for decades, not just a season. The legacy of feudal Japan isn't locked away in history books. It's walking down the street in a pair of wide-legged trousers. It's celebrated in a festival happy coat, and it's honored in the sacred white of a wedding robe. It reminds us that what we choose to put on our bodies is one of the most fundamental ways we communicate who we are, where we come from, and what we value. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which part of this sartorial story resonated the most? Was it the secret luxuries of the merchants, the terrifying armor of the samurai, or the breathtaking artistry of the ju-ni-hitoe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you're eager to keep unraveling the mysteries of the past with me, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss our next adventure into history. As you go about your day, I'll leave you with this one final question to ponder. We've seen how every choice in feudal Japan, from the weight of the silk to the height of the getter, was a deliberate signal to the world. So now consider your own wardrobe. In a world without sumptuary laws, what do your clothes say about you? What story are you telling, even before you speak?